Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be harvesting the rutabagas that I've been growing in the stock tank all winter, and after I get done with that I have several warm season plants that I'm going to be growing in this bed, and I want to show you how you can maximize your space to be able to grow a ton of food even if you don't have a huge garden. Maybe you're working in a really small space on a balcony or a patio, maybe in some raised beds or some containers. I have been there. That's where most of my first gardens were over the years. I grew in really small spaces, most of them temporary because we moved a lot, and you can grow so much more food than you think in such a small space. So let me show you how I'm going to set this up. 3 things that you should really be focused on when you're intercropping or planting a lot of plants in a small space, which also sometimes is called intensive planting, is number 1, compost. You need to feed your soil. If you feed your soil, you'll feed your plants. You want to ensure that your plants have proper nutrition, that since they're so close together, that they have enough nutrients to be able to sustain them throughout the season. The second thing that you want to think about is the kinds of plants that you're growing together. And this is important both for space and for water. You want to think about growing things in a high, medium, and low plane. And so the trellis that you see behind me is going to be used for cucumbers for me this season. Now, if you're growing things vertically, you could choose pole beans for green beans. You could choose a type of zucchini that will grow up and vertical. You could grow cucumbers like I'm doing. You could grow melons and other kinds of fruits. There are a lot of different choices, and so it's kind of a choose your own adventure when it comes to what plant you choose for growing vertically. The third very important thing is water. You want to choose plant varieties that have similar water requirements. So if you put a plant in a bed that requires a lot of water, it's not going to be happy next to a plant that requires very little water. And so here in the Southwest, we can grow things like tupperary beans or okra or amaranth, and those are not going to be happy in the same bed with a tomato, which tends to require more water. So when you're growing things close together in raised beds or in containers, think about the water requirements of each plant you choose. A bonus tip when it comes to watering is that you want to water consistently. Don't let your plants dry out. If they're in a smaller space, like mine will be behind me with this bed, then I need to make sure that I'm watering a little more often because there are going to be a lot more roots in that soil that will require a lot more water. So for these stock tank beds, I use an irrigation timer and I water twice a day. Now that's different with my basin beds that I have in ground, but for these stock tanks, they do heat up a little bit because of the material, so I water twice a day. For the high plane, I'm choosing cucumbers. I'm choosing those because I can grow them vertically. And if you choose cucumbers, there are lots of different varieties that you can grow vertically. For the medium plane, I am choosing peppers because peppers get to be about 18 to 24 inches tall, so I think that those will do really well in that middle range. And I'm choosing to use my micro dwarf tomatoes, which I have been growing inside during the winter, for the low range because those will only get to be 12 to 18 inches tall. So I'll have my cucumbers in the back growing on the trellis, I'll have my peppers in the middle, and then I'll have my micro dwarf tomatoes in the front. And I'm going to be able to harvest a lot of food out of this 5-foot by 2-foot bed. It's 5 feet long by 2 feet wide. Now you can use flower pots, grow bags, other types of raised beds. I've used Earthboxes before. If you haven't heard of those are a really cool product. They can be a little bit pricey, but I will leave the link down below for you. I used to use Earthboxes when I lived in a condo and all I had was a balcony to garden on. Now I have all of this lovely compost and I am going to put it in the bed. It'll probably take that entire wheelbarrow full of It'll probably take that entire wheelbarrow full. That's a really hard word to say. It will probably take that entire wheelbarrow full of compost to fill up this bed. Usually every season I will just top it off. I used a method called hugelkultur, so about half of this raised bed or stock tank is filled with logs and debris from the yard, so it tends to sink down over time. So I definitely noticed that it's gotten much lower. There's probably about 8 inches between the soil level and the top of the bed. So I'm just going to spread this out. As you can see in the bed behind me, I have all of my little pepper plants lined up, and these are the Fresh Bites variety from Territorial Seeds, and they're also the variety that I was growing during my indoor gardening experiment over the winter along with my micro dwarf tomatoes. Now, you may also notice that they look pretty darn pale, and that's because when the experiment was over, I kind of forgot about them. They got a little dried out, they got some spider mites, they need to be fed, but you know what? I will not be discouraged or deterred, because sometimes when you have a lot of projects going on, things get forgotten for a minute. But I think that I can fix these. So also, if you feel like you've messed up something, just try. Give it a good feed, give it a good watering, and I may treat these for spider mites, which might just actually just look like spraying them off with water. I think the plant will probably recover okay. So we'll see. This is an experimental bed. Don't be afraid to experiment in your own garden. So let me get these peppers in, and then we'll do the micro dwarf tomatoes, which are an equally sorry shape. So I am a forgetful gardener, and I have a lot of projects going on, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But I think that we can polish these up and they're gonna shine again. What I am going to do is, so you see how these roots look? I'm just gonna rough those roots up really well, stick it in the hole. That way it'll stimulate them to produce some more fresh, new roots, and hopefully they'll get over being a little bit root bound. This little red robin tomato is a little worse for the wear. I'm just gonna prune it off. I'm gonna plant it, I'm gonna feed it, and I think it'll be just fine. Part of gardening is having a little bit of fun and not taking it too seriously and just experimenting. Don't be afraid to experiment. The last tip that I have for you is when you replace your drip line back into your raised bed or your container, whatever it is that you're using, make sure that you put that drip line directly over the seeds that you just planted. So my drip line is going to go right over the top of where I planted my cucumber seeds, and then I'll work it back around so that it is around the cucumbers and the tomatoes so that everybody's happy and nobody's thirsty. This is the little editing fairy. I wanted to also mention very quickly that after I got done planting all of the plants in that stock tank, I also put up a shade cloth, and it is as simple as just a piece of shade cloth with some clothespins that I attached to the cattle panel trellis above. And that might not look very pretty at first, but it will work perfectly for the first week or two until those peppers and tomatoes adjust to being outside and kind of recover from gardener neglect. Let's review really quickly the 3 things that we talked about. 1, amend your soil with some good compost. 2, choose plants that are going to cover the high, medium, and low growing areas. And 3, choose plants that have similar watering needs and get a consistent watering schedule. With all of those things in mind, you can grow a lot of food in a small space too. I'm Kara from the Little Mission Garden. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I'll see you next time.